It's strange how silence settles in a house that isn't truly empty. My name is Claire. I'm 45 years old. For most of my life, I believed that motherhood was immutable, a constant, a title that stayed unchallenged once assumed. You're a mother. Period. End of sentence. But the past year has made me question that assumption in ways I never expected. My son, Aaron, is 23. He moved back home last September after wrapping up his graduate degree in economics. Just until I get on my feet, he told me. Maybe 3 or 4 months. That was 11 months ago. At first, I welcomed it. I fell right back into the rhythm I thought I had outgrown. Boiling water for 2 mugs in the morning, slicing apples for someone other than myself, folding his t-shirts when they came out of the dryer. It felt warm, nostalgic. It felt right. But slowly, without warning, something shifted between us. I can't pinpoint when it began. Maybe it was the night I passed by his room and saw the soft golden glow under the door. Music played, something mellow, laced with piano. I knocked gently and peeked inside to say goodnight, something I hadn't done since he was a teenager. He looked up from a novel, smiled like he meant it, and said, "Come sit a minute?" I hesitated. I should have just said goodnight. But I sat. The room smelled faintly of cedarwood and fresh linen. He leaned back against the headboard and launched into a rant about some convoluted economic theory he was grappling with. I teased him, comparing his academic meanderings to his father's, always making simple things sound complicated. Aaron laughed, that unguarded kind of laugh that lit up his entire face. I left his room with a strange feeling under my ribs. Not longing, not affection in the maternal sense. Something else. A shift, a ripple that disrupted the air between us. In the days that followed, I noticed other things. The way he lingered in doorways. How he'd lean in close behind me in the kitchen, reaching for a glass on the shelf just overhead. His hand would sometimes brush against my back. Barely a touch, but it always left my skin tingling. And I never flinched. That's what scared me. One night in early December, the heat failed. I was curled up under every blanket I owned when I heard his knock. "Your room's warmer," he said, rubbing his hands together. "Mind if I hang out for a bit?" There was nothing strange about that request, not on the surface. We'd shared blankets during storms, movie nights, and sick days when he was little. But this was different, and we both knew it. Still, I moved over. "Sure," I said. "Just for a bit." He laid down beside me. The room was quiet for a while, save for the wind against the window. "I don't sleep much anymore," he said. "Why not?" Aaron turned toward me, eyes soft and sharp all at once. "Feels like I'm waiting for something." I didn't ask what. Instead, I whispered, "You're safe here." His hand found mine beneath the covers. He didn't squeeze. Just touched, his thumb brushing across my knuckles like a rhythm. I should have pulled away. But I didn't. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, already dressed, 2 mugs of coffee steaming on the counter. "You're up early," I said. He grinned. "Didn't sleep. Thought I'd do something nice." We didn't talk about the night before, about how his fingers had lingered over mine. But the silence between us buzzed with meaning. That evening, I stood in front of my mirror longer than usual. I brushed my hair slowly, applied a little mascara, a hint of blush. I slipped into a loose gray sweater I hadn't worn in years, the kind that hung just slightly off one shoulder. I told myself it was for me. I needed to feel like a woman again, not just someone's mother. I stepped into the living room. Aaron was reading on the couch, his body draped over it like he owned the space. He looked up, and I watched the way his gaze caught on my collarbone, then dropped quickly. His cheeks flushed, and he cleared his throat. "Going somewhere?" he asked. "No, just needed a change." He nodded, and I sat across from him. We talked for an hour about nothing and everything. He laughed, leaned forward to refill my tea. His fingers brushed mine. I felt it. All of it. That night, brushing my teeth, I caught my own eyes in the mirror. I wasn't the 20-year-old I once was. I wasn't the exhausted, grieving woman I'd been after the divorce. I was something else now. Still capable of feeling. Still able to ache. Then came the soft knock. "Claire," he said through the door. I opened it. Aaron stood there in a worn t-shirt, holding 2 mugs. "Can't sleep," he said. "Thought maybe we could talk again." I paused, then stepped aside. He settled beside me on the bed. We didn't say much. He asked if I ever felt lonely. I waited, then answered honestly. "Sometimes I forget what it feels like to be seen." He turned, his voice barely above a whisper. "I see you, Claire." And I believed him. He didn't leave that night. He didn't touch me, not really. But his shoulder brushed mine under the blanket, and I listened to his breath until I fell asleep. Some lines, once noticed, can never be unseen. Monday morning arrived wrapped in gray, clouds thick and unmoving, like the world had collectively agreed to stay undecided. I dressed for work methodically, navy blouse, tailored slacks, sensible shoes. In the mirror, I clipped my hair back and stared at my reflection. I looked like I always did. Polished. Safe. like a woman who hadn't crossed a line she couldn't name. But the line was there, floating between us. And I could feel it, real, even if untouched. The staff meeting took place in the library. I sat near the window, the smell of old books grounding me, a pen resting useless in my hand. The principal, a careful man in pressed suits and guarded speech, steered us through policies. The topic shifted to boundaries, teacher-student relationships, power dynamics, inappropriate age gaps. "I just think it's always wrong," said Janine, the youngest of the English department. She adjusted her glasses and spoke like a certainty had just dawned on her. Even if both people are adults, if one is in a position of influence, that imbalance can't be ignored. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. Someone made a joke about a professor who married a former student. Everyone laughed. I did too. Or I tried to. But it caught in my throat, bitter and unfinished. They weren't talking about me. But weren't they? My stomach clenched. I excused myself to the restroom, where I stood at the sink, letting cold water run over my hands. I pressed my palms together and closed my eyes, trying to steady the uneven rhythm of my breath. Later that day in class, I gave my senior students a prompt. Do age gaps matter in relationships? I told myself it was relevant to their reading material. I told myself I was just encouraging debate. But I was looking for something. I don't know what. They're both adults, so it's no one's business, one girl said without hesitation. Another shrugged. Some people are just drawn to older partners. It's personal, not criminal. I pushed them further. What if one was a parental figure? Would that change your opinion? That gave them pause. Yeah, that's a little different, said one boy frowning. It feels messy, eh? Like who's really making the choices? I nodded, though I couldn't bring myself to speak. I dismissed them early and sat alone at my desk, staring at my own hands like they might hold answers I didn't yet understand. That evening, I found Aaron on the couch, curled into the cushions, a throw blanket tangled around his legs. He was reading barefoot, his face calm in that way that only youth allows. When I entered the room, he looked up and smiled. That smile, quiet and familiar and unguarded, shattered something in me. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice carefully neutral. He sat up. Okay, what's going on? I lowered myself into the chair across from him. Whatever's been happening between us, it's worrying me. His smile faded. Why? I searched for the right words. Because it's not just about age. It's about what we are. Who we are. I know who you are, he said, and I heard the edge in his voice for the first time. You're Claire. You're not just my mother. You're you. I shook my head, heart racing. Aaron, that's exactly the problem. I can't just pretend like it doesn't matter. His jaw clenched. But you feel it too. Don't lie. I opened my mouth, then closed it. I couldn't say it. Couldn't deny it, either. I never meant to lead you, I whispered. But you did, he said, quiet now. You did. And I'm not blaming you. Don't tell me I imagined it. Tears stung the back of my eyes. It doesn't matter what it was. It can't happen. It shouldn't have even started. He stood abruptly, the book falling from his lap to the floor. So what? Now we pretend it was nothing. I have to, I said, my voice barely audible. I have to. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he nodded once. Then I guess I should go. Aaron, I'll move out this weekend. Don't worry. You won't have to look at me and remember any of this. He walked down the hall, and the door closed behind him with a soft, final click. And the house was silent again. The following days were colorless. I went to work. I answered emails. I stood in front of a whiteboard and spoke about poetry and rhetorical devices while feeling like I was sleepwalking. No music in the kitchen. No laughter in the hall. No Aaron. One afternoon, I wandered into his room. The bed was unmade. His favorite sweatshirt still folded on the desk chair. His books, well-read and slightly dog-eared, lined the shelves. A photo sat on the windowsill. The two of us at his college graduation. His arms slung around my shoulders. Me, grinning like I'd never known heartbreak. I picked up the sweatshirt and held it close. It smelled like him. A mix of clean cotton, coffee, and something deeper, something that pulled at me. I missed him. Not as a mother misses a child, but as a woman misses someone who made her feel alive. It took me 3 days to decide. 3 long nights of lying awake in a bed that felt too wide. Of standing in doorways, half hoping the silence would break itself. Of sipping tea that went cold before I finished it. The world outside went on. Students filed into classrooms. The phone rang with reminders about bills and meetings. But I wasn't in it. On Thursday evening, I found myself parked outside his new apartment. The windows were dark except for one, a warm square of light spilling onto the street below. I hadn't called. I didn't even know what I would say. Still, I got out. The stairs to his unit creaked under my shoes. I stood outside the door, the wooden grain familiar, even though I'd never been here before. I knocked. A beat. 2. Then I heard footsteps. When the door opened, Aaron stood in the frame, barefoot, in jeans and a worn black shirt. His expression was cautious, like he'd expected anyone else but me. "Hi," I said. His throat moved as he swallowed. "Hey." He didn't ask why I was there. Just stepped aside, leaving the door open. I walked in slowly, the air around us heavy with unsaid things. "I'm sorry," I said, once we were facing each other. "For lying. For pretending I could just shut it all off." He didn't speak. His eyes searched my face. "You said I felt something. You were right." His brows knit slightly, as though afraid to believe it. I stepped closer, placed a hand against his chest. I could feel the steady thrum of his heart, or maybe it was my own. My hand shook slightly. "You told me I was seen. And you meant it. No one else has looked at me like that in years." He exhaled, the sound shaky. "You said it was wrong." "I know what I said," I whispered. "And maybe it is. But it's also real." His hand found mine. Our fingers laced. He didn't pull me in, but he didn't need to. I leaned up and kissed him. It wasn't the kiss of impulse or passion. It was quiet, steady. A decision. The kind of kiss you give when there's nothing left to hide behind. His arms folded around me, unsure at first. Then tighter. He buried his face against my neck and let out a breath that sounded like surrender. That night I stayed. And again the next. We didn't talk about definitions or where it might lead. We just existed. Made coffee in the mornings. Shared takeout on the couch. Fell asleep tangled in soft sheets and softer breath. By Saturday evening, I stood at his window watching the traffic below. "I have to go back," I said. Aaron leaned against the doorway. "To work. To everything," I murmured. "The house. The life." I paused. He didn't move for a long time. Then, "Do I come with you?" I turned to face him. "Only if you want to." "I do." So we returned. To the house that had once felt too still. He brought his laptop, his notebooks, his quiet presence. He worked from the sunroom, light painting him in soft amber. I went back to teaching like nothing had changed, because to everyone else, nothing had. To them, he was my son, back home for a stretch. To us, he was everything. We didn't tell anyone. We couldn't. But behind closed doors, the world rearranged itself. He made dinner some nights. I graded papers at the table, and his leg would rest against mine beneath the wood. In the evenings, we curled up in bed with old movies and new silences. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't reckless. But it was ours. Some mornings I woke before him, his breath steady, his hand still curled near my side. And I would lie there, listening, wondering how something so quiet could feel so right. One night, I came home late after a parent conference. Aaron was sitting on the porch, coffee in hand, the sky behind him dusky and wide. He smiled when he saw me. Not brightly, but deeply. "Long day?" he asked. I nodded, dropped my bag by the door and sat beside him. "They're starting a new program at school," I said. "Healthy relationships and appropriate boundaries." He laughed under his breath. I looked sideways at him. "Do you ever think we're making a mistake?" He was quiet for a long time. Then, "No. I think we're making a choice." The breeze moved between us, gentle and understanding. He turned to me. "I love you, Claire. My name. Not Mom. Not any version of it. Just me." And I felt it crack something open in me. "I love you too." And I meant it. No pretense. No confusion. Just truth. The following weeks were peaceful in ways I hadn't known I needed. I smiled at work. I sang along with the radio in my car again. I even started baking, something I hadn't done since Aaron was a child. We had to be careful, of course. But we'd always been careful. And in our privacy, something blossomed. Something wild and rooted. At night, when he'd touch my hand or whisper my name, I stopped asking if it was wrong. I only asked why it felt like the first thing that had ever been right. April settled over the town in warm layers. Blossoms breaking open in slow motion along every street, birds returning like old promises. I woke one night to find Aaron watching me in the half-light. He was lying on his side, head propped against his arm, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in anyone for years, belonging. "What is it?" I murmured, still half dreaming. He reached up, brushing my hair away from my face. "I just keep thinking," he said quietly. "I used to feel like I didn't belong anywhere. But here, with you, it's the only place I've ever felt completely whole." My throat tightened, my heart folding inward like a letter never sent. I ran my fingers down his wrist and whispered, "Then stay." And he did. We lived like shadows, quiet, deliberate, hidden in plain sight. To our neighbors, nothing had changed. Aaron still mowed the lawn, helped carry groceries, and waved to the couple across the street. I still smiled politely at staff meetings, corrected essays in red ink, and gave thoughtful lectures on ethics and literature. But inside our home, everything was different. He left little notes around the house, tucked between books, slipped under my coffee mug. Sometimes a quote. Sometimes just "I see you." I had never been seen like that before. Not by his father, who had long ago stopped asking me how I felt or what I needed. Not by friends who only knew how to ask, "How are you?" in ways that expected fine. Not by anyone since I was a girl. I began to write again. Just small things. Journal entries, memories I didn't want to forget. I wrote about his laugh. About the way he rubbed the back of his neck when he was trying to say something difficult. About the day he showed up at my door with a carton of raspberries, because he remembered they were my favorite. Sometimes I'd find him staring at me while I read or washed dishes. I'd meet his gaze, and neither of us would look away. It wasn't lust or fantasy. It was recognition. But peace doesn't mean certainty. And there were still nights when doubt slipped into bed beside me. I'd lie awake wondering if this was something I'd have to mourn before it ever had a future. If we were always meant to live underground, moving carefully between glances and doorways. If love, this love, had any space in the world outside ours. I didn't have answers. I still don't. But I know this. What we have is not a game. It isn't a whim or a rebellion. It's not something that happened by accident. It was a choice. One evening, I came home later than usual. Parent-teacher night had run long, and I felt wrung out paper thin. I opened the door expecting silence. But the smell of garlic and rosemary greeted me, and music played softly from the record player in the living room. Aaron was in the kitchen, barefoot, stirring something on the stove. He looked up, smiled, and said, "You made it." I stood in the doorway and didn't move. "You look tired," he said, crossing the room. "Sit. I'll bring you dinner." I watched him move, my throat aching with something that wasn't sadness, but something close. Gratitude, maybe. Or the ache of knowing you've been given something rare. He brought me a plate and sat beside me, his shoulder pressing lightly into mine. We ate in silence. At one point, he reached over and gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. In that small gesture, the world slipped away. After dinner, we sat on the back porch. The moon hung low, a white coin in a velvet sky. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and leaned into me. "Do you ever think we'll tell anyone?" I asked softly. He thought for a long time before answering. "Maybe one day. When it won't ruin us. When it won't turn what we have into something we have to explain." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what I hoped for. "You still afraid?" he asked. "Yes," I admitted. But not in the way I was. He reached for my hand, laced our fingers together. Good. There was no grand plan. No declaration about forever. We just held hands under the stars like two people in any other town, in any other time, who had simply fallen into something too human to ignore. Now, each morning, I wake up before him and sit by the window with my tea. I watch the street, the joggers with their headphones, the mail truck crawling from box to box, the school buses groaning toward the district building. It all moves on, unchanged. To the world, I'm still Claire, the high school teacher. Still respectable. Still reliable. But behind the curtains, in the quiet space we made for ourselves, I'm something else. I'm seen. Not as a role, not as a parent, not as someone's former partner, but as a woman. A person who still feels, still aches, still dares. I don't know if what we've created will last. I don't know if time or guilt or someone's suspicion will one day unravel the delicate fabric we've sewn. But I do know this. Love doesn't ask permission. It just arrives. Unexpected, uninvited, and completely unwilling to follow rules. We didn't ask for it, but we didn't turn away. And in our quiet, secret garden, hidden from the world, I bloomed again.